The college track and field season is about to heat up, but we've already seen the indoor 5K record go down, the same one that Parker Valby broke last season. And then 4 men broke the 3K record in the same race. And of course, 3 men ran top 10 all-time performances in the 300-meter indoors. But this season is likely the last one that we'll ever get to see before everything changes, and not for the better. You ain't gotta take my word for it. The man who's basically the CEO of all of college track and field said it himself. The sport is under siege. The threats are very real and they're very immediate. We're talking reduced scholarship dollars, reduced roster slots, reduced coaching positions, and of course, program closures. I've already shared my thoughts on all of this, so there's no need to go back on it now. The only thing I have to remind you of is that the reason we're in this mess is because spending in college sports has gotten out of hand, and you know which sports teams I'm specifically thinking about. And when you spend more money, the only way to justify it is to make more money. All the sports teams in college have been spending more money in D1, but track and field has failed to make more money for a very long time, which is why we're in this mess. And this hits very hard because we just finished an Olympic year where college athletes went over to the games and came back with medals to prove that they really are some of the best in the world. But the CEO also told us exactly what people need to do in order to save the sport. And when I say people, I mean the college track and field community, because nobody's coming to save us. Once again, his words. Simply put, college track and field had better get to a place where it produces very clear narratives, dynamic performances, and very real stakes. And the reason why they have to do that is to promote more value, the type of value that would attract sponsors and attract paying fans, along with media coverage. To be honest with you, almost nobody whom I talk to in the college track and field community seems to believe that this can be accomplished. And I totally get it, because they're a part of the community. They're so entrenched in the system that we've been a part of, the same system that I used to coach in, as well as competed for, that it's hard to see it from the outside. And I also know that at the most recent USTFCCCA convention, there was a proposal that eventually got shot down to help make some changes to fix all this. Shout out to all the coaches at Athletics LLC for putting it on camera while they break it all down. But from what I can tell, the changes they were discussing were basically tweaks on the same Division I model that we've had for college track and field. I don't believe we're in a place where tweaking the system is what we need. We need to blow this thing up and start all over. So that is exactly what I'm going to do, because I love track and field, but specifically at the college level. And I firmly believe that people do want to watch track and field on television. If they didn't, it wouldn't be at the top of the charts during the Olympic zone, because there's a whole bunch of Olympic sports that nobody wants to watch, and you know which ones I'm talking about. So let's have a very real conversation about how to save college track and field, because right now, there's an athletics director somewhere in D1 who's planning on cutting a program, but the athletes on that team have no idea yet. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. And I'm Coach Rob, the founder of SCArecruiting.com, where I rank the best track and field recruits across the entire nation. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I try to read them all. But before I go any further, I do need to make it clear just how bad the problem actually is. And I'm going to start off with TV ratings. The only way to evaluate college track and field when we talk about TV is to focus on the national championship meet, specifically in D1, because it's just about the only thing that ever gets a shot at being on TV. Amongst all the nationally televised championships that get hosted on TV from Division I. College track and field rated, behind of course the obvious ones, but also behind D1 women's lacrosse, D1 beach volleyball, and D1 wrestling. I'm not making this up. The only D1 sport that did not beat them out cleanly for their national championship that you might recognize is men's college soccer, for whatever the reason. So let us just admit that nobody's making any money from the sport being on TV right now. But beyond that, none of the other sports in Division 1, once again that you might recognize, look like this. It has been said that track and field is an individualized sport, but in the current model, it's even more so than it has to be. Beyond that, if you look at what other sports are doing, all of the ones that are taken seriously have figured out some basics that track and field seems to skip past. You already know that the traditional team sports put one team against another in every single game that you watch. And they face off, and somebody gets a win, and somebody gets a loss, and it goes to your record. But aside from the obvious, golf teams, bowling teams, wrestling teams, even swimming teams to some degree, and yes, tennis teams, have win-loss records in the NCAA. As a result, you can produce conference standings that are based on more than just one result from the entire season, which makes it a whole lot easier for an AD to actually evaluate what's happening out there. And I don't have time to go through all of them, but in a sport like tennis, 64 Division I teams get onto a bracket to face off to become a national champion. No matter what conference you're in, you've got a shot to make it to the big dance. You just got to get there by winning. And college track and field right now looks nothing like that, because all of the meets that teams might choose to go to are essentially scrimmages while we're in the regular season. If you don't believe me, just consider. All of the meets we're doing, indoors and outdoors, are just people trying to put down seed times that might qualify them through to a regional or a national. But remember, only a small number of athletes throughout the entire nation are going to go in the current model. We're calling it a team title, but it's for the most part celebrating the top individual athletes, which for the most part do happen to be on a lot of the same teams. Which brings up the last major problem, because the lack of a clear narrative makes it almost impossible for anyone, including a fan, or for that matter, athletes who compete in college right now, to truly understand what makes a team good or not. Aside from just having some national caliber athletes, for most D1 conferences, winning a conference championship at your conference championship meet doesn't actually mean anything. Your season's still going to be over after that meet is done. The system is actually so broken that the men of the Florida Gators have won the last 3 national championships for outdoor track and field in a row, and they never won their conference in any of those seasons outdoors. I'm not making this up, and that would never happen in anybody else's sport. I'm going to ask you a question, assuming that you're a track and field fan, because you're still watching this video at this moment. If you were an athletic director for an average D1 program somewhere in the country, and then you knew that you had a team that doesn't make any revenue, doesn't have fans, never gets on television, doesn't win their conference, has no plan to win their conference in the future, and has no prayer of ever winning anything at the national level on a team scale. What would you do with that team when you've got to find revenue share dollars for your football team? Think about it. I'm not saying any names of specific schools, but I could sure give you a whole bunch right now. I'm not just here to complain about it. So from this point on, I am going to tell you how we fix all this. Because the one thing we know is true is that roster sizes will be cut down going forward. That change is coming. So the new model for track and field has to get with that program. But with 45 athletes or less, we're going to have to create a track and field competitive model that someone could put on television if they actually wanted to. In other words, a track and field meet is going to have to transform from an all-day affair to now becoming something that looks a whole lot more like a true sporting event. Approximately 3 hours for any standard track and field meet. And we need something that produces very clear winners and losers in every track and field meet. Not just individual athletes who might win or lose, but teams that win or lose every day they're going out there. That gives fans of any school something to root for. And it also gives the coaches something to shoot for. So in the model that I'm about to give you, as long as your team can keep winning in the meets you go to, you're gonna be on the bracket. Yes, there will be a bracket to determine who will be the national champion. But I admit that some sacrifices will have to be made, because if things are as bad as the CEO is telling us, then you might have to cut off a limb in order to save the rest of the body. First things first, no more scrimmages. college track and field meets need to be scored. All of them. Your team. You can't send athletes to one meet over here and one meet over there. We're not doing that anymore. One team goes to a meet where you compete to win against other teams on that day. Maybe in the early part of the indoor or outdoor season, we can still do scrimmages. You can call them open if it makes you feel better. And if historically you want to keep Florida relays, Texas relays, which are events that normally happen in the month of March anyway, which is still the front part of the outdoor season, I guess we can keep them. I'd vote moving back a week, but it is what it is. You can even count the individual athlete performances in the model I'm about to give you, but it's not going to help your team get to the big dance. And the next thing is to get rid of the NCAA Indoor Championship meet, because nobody really cares about it anyway. Specifically, not the athletes or the coaches, but people who might potentially be fans. We're going to replace it with something else going forward. Trust me, I'm getting to that. And we're going to run indoor track anyway. It's just part of the larger season now. And since this new model is set up to celebrate the best teams in college track and field, what we used to call the NCAA Championship meet, especially the rules we were using indoors, where the top 16 athletes in any given event qualified to run at a championship meet. But all of those 16 athletes are immediately All-Americans. Your second team just for showing up. Your first team if you go top 8, and then you get a medal if you go first, second, or third. Take those same rules and then create an outdoor All-American meet all the way at the end of the season. We can celebrate the athletes and the coaches who helped them get there. But we're not going to do any relays because, well, it's not a team championship. It's about the best athletes in the nation. And we have to get the meets down to just about 3 hours. Otherwise, you're never getting on TV because the networks just can't support it. College track and field needs to become something that a casual fan, the people who watch the Olympics, could be flipping the channels and eventually just land on it and see some teams going at it in the middle of a meet where action is happening. And maybe they just hang out for a while for the next 5-10 minutes and watch it. Something like that. There are some simple solutions that make the meets shorter. 1. Cut down the amount of teams that show up to these meets. You should now have approximately 8 teams, but never more than 12 that show up to a scored Division I college track and field meet. With the scoring system I'm about to give you, anything more than 12 teams creates a meet that is flat out too long. It's just not going to fit into the parameters. And besides, nobody wants to watch a bunch of slow people run anyway. That said, the teams are going to be facing off, so at the end of these meets, you'll be on a leaderboard. Somebody's going to be first, and somebody's going to be 12th if there are 12 teams. And those team finishes are going to make a difference towards your overall record for the regular season. It's not going to be a clean win and loss record like you might see in basketball. But we can still do something that looks more like what gymnastics is doing, because even their system makes more sense. And for the record, people actually watch their national championship. Like 5 times as many people watch theirs compared to track and field, even though that sport shares Olympic ratings that are almost just about the same as track. And once you have no more than 12 teams at any officially scored meet, we're only going to do half of the track and field events, either indoors and outdoors, in any one meet. I call it an A schedule and a B schedule, and they're going to flip-flop at different points during the season. The only time that we run all of the events will be during a 2-day event, specifically the conference championship, or what I'm going to call the new regional model, and of course the national championship model. For those meets, day 1 will be an A schedule, and day 2 will be a B schedule. But the only thing that really matters is you can still televise a 3-hour event for day 1 or day 2, and maybe even edit it down on TV if you really want to, depending on who the network is, by oscillating back and forth with some version of sprints to a distance event, and yes, putting in some specialty relays. You're creating a product that keeps entertainment on the track, but we're also going to split the field events between the A and the B schedule. You're going to run those concurrently while the track events are also going. To be clear, relays are pretty easy for a fan to follow. Penn Relays has taught us that. It's the reason why that event got as big as it did for a period of time. But I also have to admit that I did have to cut some events to make this all work. So indoors, I'm sorry, we're just doing the 3K. We're not doing the 5K, because it just takes too long if we add it in the meet. For the outdoor meet, we're doing the 5K only, get rid of the 10K, because once again, it's kind of redundant, we can't do both. And as far as the multis go, If you are a multi, you're a very valuable athlete for your team. You're just not doing the decathlon in a college uniform for a regular standard meet that helped your team win a title. If you qualify for the decathlon, based on your regular season performance, you might make it into the All-American meet, and you can do it there. Which brings us to the most important ingredient for all of the scored meets. Only 2 to 3 athletes per event can be entered by any track and field team. We gotta keep the meet shorter. We ain't running endless time trials out here. And every athlete you put out there will get scored. If you happen to have 3 athletes, because the meet has 8 teams or fewer, then fine, we'll scratch the 3rd athlete. And we're scoring it just like cross country. If you do the math, you never end up with more than 24 athletes entered in any one event during the track and field meet. And 2 athletes from each team will be scoring. So if one of your athletes from, LSU goes number 1 in the 100, and somebody else gets 16th, that's 17 points on the scores. But if, Florida goes 2 and 3, that's 5 points on the scores. Using cross-country rules, Florida is clearly in the lead right now, just after that one event. Remember, in cross-country, the low point score always wins. You now always have a meet structure, where we have no more than 3 heats outdoors of any sprinting event. On the men's or the women's side, we can move this thing along. If you can get it down to a point where we only put 1 athlete in any heat from any specific school, it makes it really easy for fans now. They just gotta root for the person, for the team that they're actually pulling for, anytime they see that uniform show up in a competition. That said, this model puts a huge premium on versatile track and field athletes, because Grant Holloway of the University of Florida was already, in my book, the best college track and field athlete we've seen in the past decade, and ain't even close. But everybody would know it if he were being scored in this system, because he could long jump, he could hurdle, and he could sprint. And he could high jump if he really wanted to. Don't get me wrong, in this system, the athletes are going to have to put in work, but no more than they would have done already in a USC-UCLA dual meet or something like that. The coach can put whoever they want to on the line, or in the circle for that matter. But once they do, that's whoever they chose to put in the game. And their performance is going to make a difference on the scoreboard. So if you run slow and lose a race, even if another teammate is performing well, the scoreboard will also tell on you and make it clear to the fans what just happened. Remember, college track and field meets right now are basically endless time trials. The meets can go from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'm not making this up because I competed in them myself. But none of these changes would even matter if we didn't figure out how this fits for the NCAA team championship structure. Because teams will be competing in non-conference challenge meets, that's what I call them, as well as conference challenge meets. Not the conference championship, but it is a meet within teams from your conference. You can even throw a duel on the schedule, indoors and outdoors if you want. I personally think it would be fun, but hey, it is what it is. And I would also institute something else called a regional challenge, because USTFCCCA gave us 9 Division I regions across the country. We just don't use those regions for anything. Literally, they qualify you for nothing in the current system. Indoors and outdoors, I would have all of that add up to 10 scored meets. You can fill in some scrimmages. Like I said, you can call them opens if it makes you feel better. Things that we probably used to do anyway. Those long marathon meets, like the Florida relays or the Texas relays, we can keep those there for historic purposes. But now you would have a system that produces conference standings, national RPIs, and just about everything else that the other team sports in college actually have. And beyond that, we could now still do a conference championship meet, a 2-day event with the A and B schedule. If you're a conference like the SEC, you've got more than 12 teams, so I'd only take the top 12 to that meet. Everybody else, it should have been better during the season. And this is where things get interesting, because if you win your conference, you now have an automatic bid to the big dance. Yes, you are on the bracket for the national championship first round. Remember, we're going to do 2 rounds. I would take 52 teams around the nation, because once we give out these automatic bids, we're going to fill out the rest of the bracket with at-large bids. I would give the top 4 teams in the nation, college football playoff style, at least the old playoff version, they would get an automatic bid to the final round because they earned it. They're the most dominant teams in the nation. For the other 8 teams that join them, for the 12 that make it to the national championship, the 2-day event with an A-B schedule to crown a national champion. once again, on the men's and the women's side. But regardless, I would have the other 48 teams on the bracket duke it out. Remember, a selection committee is going to determine where they have to go to compete. You end up with 4 regions and 12 teams in each. And the top 2 go on to the national championship final round, where the top 4 teams in the nation are already waiting for them. In this model, any track team around the nation in Division 1 only has to do one thing now: win and you're in. That's how you get to the big dance. If you win a bunch of regular season meets, well, you're probably going to get an at-large bid. But in the likely event that you don't win everything, probably getting 4th, 5th, and 6th and a whole bunch of other meets, especially if your strength of schedule isn't all that high, you're going to have no choice. You better win your conference championship, or else it is what it is. The rules to win your conference, the rules to get out of the NCAA first round, and the rules to win the national championship are the same rules. The same ones that we were practicing in all of those regular season meets. So for that reason, we will now know who has the best team from top to bottom. And we're still going to do the All-American meet after all of this, which is basically what we've been doing anyway up until now. Because the top athletes and their coaches, they earned it. Don't get me wrong, the top teams we have in Division 1 right now are still the ones that are best suited to dominate in this model. On the men's side, teams like Texas Tech, Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Florida. And on the women's side, Oregon, LSU, Arkansas, and Texas, once again, would likely be the best teams. But now, for the very first time ever, every Division 1 team has a very clear path to win a national title. And we've created a television product that somebody could actually pick up if they were interested. Remember, this model is designed to fit within a 3-hour window for the most part, but you can still television edit it down to 2 hours. Maybe you just start the cameras on a delay when the way that you air it, and maybe show some highlights of the stuff that people missed. It's fast-paced and keeps the action on the track, because let's be honest, nobody really wants to watch any woman run a 45-minute 10K in a conference championship meet. And for all my cross-country fans out there, I would treat it the same way that volleyball does to beach volleyball. Track and field is where it's at, and cross-country is kind of like the add-on. Since we know the roster sizes are going to get smaller anyway, maybe you just cut down the meet schedules for cross-country, because they actually have a scoring system that works. Maybe you do 3 regular season meets at max. Do your conference, your regional, and your national, and there we go. Of course I am just one man, and I recognize these ideas are pretty far out there, but I also think they're so crazy that they just might work. But that's what we have the comment section for. You are going to let me know if this gives us a way to put track and field on television and make it competitive enough for somebody to actually watch it once it gets there. And perhaps it could save a track program that right about now is on the chopping block, even though the athletes and maybe even their coaches don't know it yet. If you think you need help getting recruited, you are probably right. On SCArecruiting.com, you can get a ton of resources like my free recruiting guide, detailed videos, online courses, and much more. And if nothing else, and you just really want to see more content like this, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.